The subject is you.
I love that, obviously.
Is that okay?
Okay.
It's your favourite subject.
My absolute favourite subject. I could just talk about it forever.
Welcome, Claudia.
Thank you for having me, Danny.
I'd like to ask you one question. What is the change you're trying to make?
We want people to have work that they love. You know, work is a huge part of the human condition. And it makes a huge difference if that work is meaningful, suited to you, something that you enjoy. And yet there are so many reasons why people don't have work that's right for them. We don't think that people fall out of school necessarily in the right place. It's often driven by their background or which town they're born in or their gender. The more you believe that's true, the more you believe it's random, maybe even unfair, the more you believe that there are hundreds, thousands or millions of people out there who could be in jobs that they're better suited for who aren't. And we believe that there are millions. And in particular, you know, we're very passionate about people getting into fantastic tech jobs. But even once people are in great jobs, to have really meaningful work through the whole of your career, you need to be able to upskill, move with the times. And that's the other part of what Makers is all about, is helping people to get those jobs. Makers, but also in fact, it's kind of what I'm personally passionate about.
So you started with we, and then you shifted to me. This is about you. And I would
Let's
like
go
to
with
know
me.
you, your drivers, your
Yeah.
passion, your energy, what you're investing that soul in day to day. So you talk about the world's changing, skills need to change, skills need to adapt. We no longer go into one role for the rest of our lives. How are you going about making that happen?
Yeah, for me, it's very personal. I passionately believe that as a society, we just don't invest enough in this question and this problem. And that if we did, it would be better for the economy and for society, but also for individual flourishing. So today, the thing that I put my energy into and that I'm absolutely passionate about is my role as Chief Executive of Makers. And Makers started as Europe's first coding bootcamp. So its genesis was taking people who had never, ever done software engineering before and taking them through a 13 to 15 week training program and then deploying them in companies ranging from Deloitte to Google, really amazing brands, as junior software engineers. And back in the day, that was considered heretic, you know, the idea that you could train people in 13 to 15 weeks, the idea we never looked at background, we only looked at attitude and potential, the idea that that would be a good way of selecting people. This was considered completely counter to really everyone's belief about how good education looked. But of course, today, this is now quite mainstream. We consider ourselves the established disruptors because now most organisations recruit junior talent, a portion of it at least in this way, taking career switches. So the thing that we really got good at over those 12 years of introducing this new way of training people is helping people to become fearless learners and go through profound transformations. And ultimately, when people say, well, how can someone learn to code in 12 to 15 weeks? The answer is, well, that's the beginning of the learning journey. It is not the end. And I think what we're really, really good at Makers is teaching people to be really effective learners. We equip them with the emotional intelligence to know how to cope when you want to throw your laptop out the window. We prepare people for the idea that you're not stupid, it's just new, that it requires resilience, that it requires grit, the toolkit for how do you break problems down. And it makes them incredibly effective learners once they leave the boot camp. Well, AI is literally about being a fearless learner. You know, the kind of human intelligence that you need to thrive in this new, extraordinary science fiction world that we've all stepped into, whether we wanted to or not, frankly, is learning quotient, the ability to be really, really effective at learning and actually self-led learning.
So let's go back to your learning. Have you studied coding? Have you career switched?
So I started my career as a management consultant. And a big part of my drive is that I fell into that really randomly. And it was a complete transformation of my life. I worked for McKinsey. They sent me to Harvard Business School. They paid for me to go to Harvard Business School. It was
That's the second best MBA in the world, is that right? After London Business School. I'm just checking.
100%.
Yeah.
As you and Gotham both know, that's what I think. It was a completely life-changing experience for me. And I have often reflected on just the luck of that for me and how do people get these different opportunities. So my career started at McKinsey. I left for a little bit. I worked for Tony Blair's delivery unit, which had a big impact on me as well. And I saw the power of a passionate team committed to solving a difficult problem. I knew that's what I wanted to do ultimately, which is really what Makers is.
Amazing. And in 2021, you received an OBE?
I did.
Tell me more.
It was amazing. Yeah, I was very honoured, obviously, well, literally.
What was that in honour of?
Services for Careers Education.
Okay.
So after I left McKinsey, the next role that I took, my first chief exec role, was as the founding chief executive of an organisation called the Careers and Enterprise Company, which was set up to help inspire and prepare young people moving from school into work.
Right.
And the thesis was that young people need to have role models who they believe in and exposure to the world of work to be able to set the right sorts of ambitions whilst they're at school. And that it's actually one of the biggest distinguishers between maybe kids from more affluent backgrounds, that they're exposed to lots of role models versus children maybe from less well-off backgrounds who maybe have fewer of those role models.
What year was that?
2015.
2015. So no generative AI in 2015. How is that being disrupted now?
Proximity and understanding of what work is like is the most strong unlock in raising a young person's ambition and helping them navigate a path into work. And AI can do so much in terms of bringing that to life for young people. So you have to be careful because a lot of it is about feeling and what does it feel like to be in a hospital or in an office? What feels good to you? And there are lots of nuances to that. Do I want to be among lots of people when I work, or do I actually want to have quite a solitary career? These things are very important in terms of picking what we want to do. Maybe AI can't bring that to life. But of course, there's a lot about work that AI can bring to life instantly for people. And that's amazing. The converse, obviously, is that people are worried about work and the future.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's wrong. I think it's very unsettled what AI will do for work. But I do believe there will be work. It will evolve in new ways and the economy will evolve. I remember when I was doing the work before, when you would ask children what they wanted to do, it was almost always driven by what their parents and those around them did. And of course, those jobs are likely to change. But in a way, it doesn't really matter because what children really need is they need to want to do something.
Yeah.
And ultimately, if you can get somewhere, as Makers shows, you can pivot later. What you need is you need hope and ambition and curiosity. And bringing the world of work to life, that's what it does for young people. So Danny, I'm going to reciprocate and ask you the same question about what do you think matters now for young people building skills? And also, where do you think the economy will go?
The ability to not take things at face value, to think for themselves, to question, to judge, to take responsibility. I mean, ultimately, I've always believed taking responsibility for your own actions, taking responsibility for your own outcomes, that doesn't change. If you've got a calculator, you can do numbers quicker. If you've got a word calculator, which is my very layman's term for generative AI, if you've got a word calculator, maybe you can get words out more quickly. But at the end of the day, you're still responsible for your output, your outcomes, and you can do things quicker. That's great. And yes, there will be roles and functions in roles that will be replaced, but they will be made easier, that will be made quicker. But then there is that, this is interesting, there is that social element, that empathy, that sympathy. Actually, generative AI is getting pretty sympathetic. It is being more, it can be quite considerate. It can be quite emotional about how it interacts with somebody. It can be more sensitive in its communication than some humans can be. But ultimately, it is also a facade and it's not real. And there you get into the very dangerous territory of where you think it's real, where you think it's a person, where you start to develop a relationship with it. That is insanely confusing for a much younger generation, and maybe confusing also for people that haven't got as much social contact as they potentially could have.
And Danny, actually, can I come in on that? Because
Yeah.
I really do agree with that. And I think, I mean, when you think about kids, and I mean, this is, I'm just bringing your point to life,
Yeah.
but you think about how much learning takes place when you get bashed up in the playground, and you annoy someone and you take their spade, and then what happens next. Imagine that this child now that has this agent that is built around their ego, endlessly empathetic, completely sympathetic to their point of view, never bashes them up. I'm so aligned with you on this. Where's the big public health campaign about this? Because I think we need much more of it.
Yeah.
The risk that people recede into themselves and lose resilience being sort of stroked by a fake friend, I think is really very high.
Yeah.
And we already, we're reading about it and about the anthropomorphization of these tools. But I just so agree with you. And I think the minute that you imagine that kind of scenario where you can have this friend that is built on your needs versus the real world, which is not, and that's what growing up is all about, isn't it? Taking responsibility for your action in a world that is not there to just look after you. Yeah, I think that's a really, really challenging situation.
It's quite terrifying. You're effectively engaging with a product, and a product that is commercial, and that commerciality is in you wanting to engage with that product. And so that product confirming your worldview and reinforcing, and when you tell it it's wrong, it apologizes. There has to be some regulation, there's got to be some controls, but who knows if that's even possible, or does it go beyond the point of no return where people then realise that some controls and some regulation is required?
Well, and I think, the other thing I've been watching for, and again, this is, maybe getting into, but, Sora and these kind of hyper-real videos.
Yeah.
Again, where is the public information campaign that says, maybe it's too late, maybe no one would trust it. Maybe the problem is that people have lost so much faith in the government, but that is a wild shift in terms of how democracy works. Everyone knows that democracy is predicated on information. And we've all known with social media, of course, that's a huge toxification of our democracy. But, completely believable, completely fake video is very, very extreme. I mean, what are we all going to be doing? We're going to be sort of standing on hilltops and communicating by Morse code with,
I think the last few years of politics, global politics, is more unreal than any unreal video that Sora could ever create. And maybe Sora can create something that is more realistic than what we see right now. But I agree with you. You don't know what you can trust, you don't know what you can believe. And in a way, you don't know what you can trust and you don't know what you can believe now, because fact kind of went out the window quite a long time ago. Experts went out the window. Media, independence, trust all went out the window. So almost the things that are real, that are written by humans, are somewhat unbelievable. It is a tremendously different world that we're moving into. And so where does that go? And if we just look at the trend of social media was only there for one thing, and that was to sell marketing, to sell advertising.
As Zuckerberg famously said.
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
we
sell ads.
We sell ads. That's what we do.
Yeah.
And it's been very good at selling ads, and they are very wealthy, and they're creating their own frontier models, which is extraordinary, but with no regulation. And so reinforcing a worldview, pushing people into a silo, feeding their appetites is what keeps their eyeballs on the screen, and that's what sells the ads. And there's been no real regulation of any sort. Things have come in a little bit too little, too late, and that's worrying. So our direction of travel, in terms of where we're going, no one knows where we're going. There are some absolute end-of-the-world outcomes here that are quite terrifying. Something I commented on recently, and actually quoting Yuval Noah Harari of Sapiens, is the world seems to be really worried about immigration right now, for good, for right or wrong reason. But while they're watching the tiny number of people coming over on boats or coming across the border, they're ignoring the millions, if not billions, of digital immigrants, these bots, who are absolutely coming to take their jobs. The beautiful idea that you would have a universal basic income, that people would no longer need to work or do hard toil in the farms, and food and society could be in a kind of beautiful unison, it's just never going to happen. It's just never going to happen because fundamentally the power and the wealth is being consolidated in the hands of a tiny number of people into the billions and trillions. And those people, never in the history of humanity, have turned around and said, we should distribute this.
Well,
wealth.
I mean, if we're going to have universal basic income, why don't we have it today?
Yeah.
Why do we think that there's something about AI that's going to change the choice that rich people make about how to distribute their wealth? I do think that there's a massive intellectual gap in that, where we're sort of imagining there'll be a shift in people's political choices as they get more power. Seems unlikely, doesn't it?
It seems very unlikely. We know that power corrupts fundamentally, universally.
This is a political. It's just confusing political and economic arguments, I think, and there's no reason why the political situation would change, but the economic one is clear, and there is a very clear concentration. So, where does that leave us?
In a terrifying set of outcomes, and what we need are good people trying to do good things and trying to battle that wave. Whether we can or can't is to be determined, I suppose.
Well, you and I both heard Laura Gilbert speak recently, who we're both huge fans of, and who built the AI incubator for Number 10, and who always starts with, what is the world you want to build? This is it. Today you are choosing in the decisions that you make right now, as we're in the foothills of AI, the world that we're going to build for the future, and think carefully about those decisions. And it's a powerful argument. It's
really powerful, actually. It's worth repeating. What is the world that you want to build? People in positions of leadership, in companies, in society, in education, need to be asking themselves that question rather than fast following trends that are set by AI businesses, technology businesses. We have to take a beat. I think there is this inherent, we don't get a say in the matter. We have to play catch up because everything's moving so fast. And we do have agency. You opened with agency, didn't you? We have to take that responsibility and say, what is the world that we're trying to build? Or are we just going to follow the money, follow the trends that are going to be out there? What is the world that you want to build?
I want people to have work that they love. And I do think we have to have a world of work. I don't think a world of leisure works. I think leisure works if it's meaningful leisure.
Yeah. Well, a holiday is a week in the sunshine, 2 weeks in the sunshine, 3 weeks in the sunshine. But what does it look like at 3 months, 6 months, and 9 months? That's not a holiday.
People need to be fulfilled. They need to be doing things that have meaning. And I think and that's the world that we want to build. We want people to use AI. AI is a superpower, right? So we think about it in terms of mastery, automation, and reimagining. So the first thing is that you need to be able to master AI. And we have sort of 3 tiers of mastery. Good prompt engineering, which everyone should be able to do. You know, how do you...
Asking good questions.
Asking good questions.
I mean, that's a pretty basic talent.
100% providing the right context, knowing what the output is that you want. The second is building your custom bots, you know, your gems or your custom GPTs, giving that little AI its persona, some bespoke data. It's your chairman. It can respond to questions about your strategy. It can help you with a particular problem. And thirdly, building agents, which is obviously when an AI can do multiple different tasks strung together.
Yeah.
So we have these 3 different tiers, and we talk about people mastering AI. But to your earlier point, we have a few mantras in that. You own the output. You own the output. And a good kind of mental model is that AI is your assistant, or it's a junior. It can make mistakes. It will make bad decisions if you don't give it good context. Also, private data into enterprise models only.
Yeah.
And even then there should be guardrails. But, you know, we have a few of these kind of simple mantras to help people kind of build their AI mastery. Then they move into automation. And this is where you think about reimagining your work. And we have 3 different kind of levels of this: efficiency automation, intelligence automation, and complexity. So efficiency, plot your week in terms of joy and time. Look at all your low joy, high time activities. Let's get rid of them.
Right.
Intelligence, where is it that being smart really drives value in your business? Drive AI at that. So that as AI gets more capable, your answers get better. And then complexity, what are the things that you couldn't do before that you can do now? And I'm going to quote Rachel Carroll for this from Koru Kids, brilliant example where she described how they match nannies and families. Well, if you've got a family that's got a kid that loves to sing, The Choreo Kids drop down just doesn't let you select for a singing nanny. Even if you put singing in as a keyword, not all nannies have that in their CV, but AI can figure out that a kid that loves to sing will be well matched with a nanny that's studying theatre.
Right.
You know, that's a complexity problem. That's a thing that you just couldn't do before.
And is that called the Mary Poppins effect?
Henceforth branded as. So that's the second thing, automate your work. And then the third thing is reimagine your role. And this is where, you know, you've got to put yourself in the shoes of the person out there trying to build your business AI first with none of the infrastructure. How would they do it? You've got to do it first. It's the innovator's dilemma. You've got to reimagine your role, reimagine your business AI first. Make sure that as AI gets more capable, your business does better, not the reverse. It needs to be a tailwind, not a headwind. But within everybody's role, we can start to reimagine how we do our work. And once you've mastered your work, AI, and you've automated some of your work, you can really think creatively about that role. Yeah. And we think everyone should be doing this. And as you go through this journey, building that learning quotient, the ability to continue to learn, the toolbox for learning, so that you're not just learning how to prompt, you're learning, well, what am I going to do next time someone says, oh, have you tried Sora? And you go, I don't know what that is. I don't know. What's your toolkit for learning something new? And then do you have the emotional intelligence to kind of manage this exhausting journey of constantly having to upgrade your expertise and deal with the grief of giving up expertise that you had before that's now redundant? You know, you need a lot of emotional intelligence for that. So we build that in as well. But that's the basics that we really think everyone needs. And there's global evidence right now that women are using AI less than men. Right. I'm sure there'll be other fractures in society. So we need to see this being, you know, this level being brought up, the democratization of AI usage, you know, across society.
Equitable access is key. You talked about privacy of data. That's something that I'm working really hard to try and make available to institutions, and partnering with yourself to try and then add the learning and the training to make the two come hand in hand. What really gets me from what you described, there's lots of bits I love there about taking responsibility for the output and that agency, focusing on higher effort tasks. I mean, higher effort tasks do mean higher effort as well. So that low effort, low joy, actually, sometimes
it's the break.
You want the break.
Yeah.
You want to just do some reactive
100%.
emails and not always be cognitively strained and stressed. But I do like the bit about the EQ of you refer to it as throwing away those things that you've already learned because they're no longer relevant. You've got to learn some new skills. But actually, I see them as building blocks. Those things that you no longer need to use are the foundations for the new skills that you've learned. And you always take something from the things that you did from in the past, which is really important. Yeah. And you're constantly taking yourself to a higher and higher level of experience. And it can be quite fulfilling, theoretically.
Yeah, but Daniel, that's an incredibly inspiring way of describing it. And I think that paints you as an incredibly effective learner, because I think you've kind of moved through from, you don't feel the grief of not doing things. You recognise the growth, which is, you know, what we all need to kind of aspire to.
I'm an eternal optimist, so I just see the positive in everything, and you just say, how can I make good of this?
Well, you know, Lord Young, who was Margaret Thatcher's fixer, was on my board years ago, and he said he'd never met a successful person who wasn't optimistic. Right. So I do think optimism takes you a long way.
Yeah, that's really useful. So talking about optimism, there is a risk that people who are successful just do good things and do better things and better things still. But the reality is that they have as many, if not more, failures than they do successes. But we tend not to see the failures. We tend to see the successes. We tend to see the OBE. We tend to see the #1 CIO in the UK. Just thought I'd throw that in there.
Danny, say it again. What were you? Were you #1 CIO in the UK?
Just in 2020, you know, not every year.
And, but always listed, weren't you? I mean, often top 10.
But we don't tend to see the bits that we put in all this energy, we put in all this drive, we put in all this planning and didn't work out.
Oh my goodness, 100%. If this was going to be a podcast about my failures, Danny, we would need a longer session, honestly. You know, life is absolutely filled with failures. I mean, there are so many things that have gone wrong in my career and so many mistakes that I've had. You know, when I think about myself transitioning to becoming a CEO and how wrong I was about what a CEO was, you know, if you thought my job was to sort of divide people into work streams, you know, get everyone sort of powering on a set of kind of consulting projects with goals and scope, and people sort of saying, well, what about HR? And I said, no, come on, let's just focus on solving the problem. Yeah. I wasn't thinking at all about, you know, what they needed, what the HR structures were around those people. It just wasn't on my mind, because at McKinsey, that's all dealt with for you. It's the most optimized, brilliant HR environment, such that you don't even really think about it particularly. Ultimately, building effective HR environment was so important. I used to do a lot of the work myself, ridiculous, and then realised that ultimately, being a CEO is nothing about doing the work. There are strategic details you have to handle as a CEO, and there are kind of big blocks that you put in place. But then a lot of what you're doing is just unblocking other people, enabling other people, being there when things go wrong. Taking broad shoulders when things go wrong. That's a huge part of being a CEO. But figuring all that out took me such a long time. So, I mean, that's just one example, but there were just so many times in my career where I got things wrong. For me, when I get things wrong, I think to myself, well, I won't do that again. And I've learned something now.
Right.
And I move on.
When you look at your next challenge,
yeah,
how often do you look at the challenge and go, there's a challenge I can do? Or do you say, there's a challenge that terrifies me, that's the one I want to go for?
When I was younger, I was very much of that ilk. You know, if I'm scared of it, I'm doing it.
Right.
And that is really how I spent my teens and my 20s. When I left university, I wrote to 15 microfinance organisations saying I wanted to go and work for them. Mm-hmm. I was obsessed with the idea of women running their own businesses and sort of female emancipation. So I wrote these letters kind of quoting Virginia Woolf.
Right.
So no one wrote back to me, as you can imagine. These like long letters. One organisation sent me a one-line email saying, I see no reason why you shouldn't come. So I went and learnt Spanish, travelled to Bolivia, turned up 6 months later. They said, who on earth are you? I said, don't you remember that email you sent me saying there was no reason why I shouldn't come? And went and worked with them for a period of time. Amazing, life-changing experience. But I was always pushing myself, out of my comfort zone. It was really my belief that life was about experience, good and bad, not about comfort, not just about being happy, but about experiencing what life has to offer. Today, I might be a little bit less like that. Mm-hmm. Got little kids. I think now I think quite a lot about balance in terms of how I live my life. I want to make sure that I have space for them. Right now, they're little. You know it, Danny. We have a joke about the times when you can't communicate with me because I'm picking Rice Krispies off the floor at 8 a.m. So I think right now I'm in a slightly different place, a bit more focused on balance. But watch this space. I might go back to the push yourself to the limits in the years ahead.
It's a good point. If you take the whole package, you are doing things that are stretching and terrifying. That's raising a young family and being a CEO and trying to navigate the world of AI at the same time.
Well, that's a nice way to put it. And I have to say, I find it such a privilege. I mean, Danny, we are collaborating in this AI world. We're having an absolute riot working together. One of the things I love is I love change. I love problems. I love change. I love challenge. And AI it's just that in abundance, isn't it? It's the most ultimate intellectual challenge. All of us are trying to imagine the future. We again remember with humility Laura Gilbert's comments in the recent event that we were at, where she said that on average experts are about as accurate as monkeys throwing paint at the wall or something. I think that was the way that she described it. So when you look back over history, people, experts always get it wrong. Figuring out this brave new world is what could be more interesting, what could be more engaging. So it's an absolute privilege to be working in AI at the moment. And I think for both of us, we have amazing companies that we work with. And everything is being invented in companies. Yeah. There are no textbooks. They are being invented by the people that we're spending time with. And each new invention is kind of being relayed person to person. You're kind of, ironically, we're in the world of AI, and yet most of what you really are learning about AI, you have to kind of get from people because it's not really written down yet. People are figuring it out live. And I think what makes this journey so fun for me and for you, I know Danny as well, is that we're working with amazing companies and talking to the most interesting innovators and learning from them. Yeah. And that's why we're able to do good work, because they trust us to share how they're thinking. We turn that into training, and it's a virtuous cycle where our training is always right at the cutting edge, but it also meets their needs. But speaking very personally, what could be more fascinating?
I think we can close on a note from Hamilton, which is, we are so lucky to be alive right now.
I will take that.
Thank
Danny,
you,
well-
Claudia Harris OBE.
Thank you, Danny.